correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm Steve, and I'm joined tonight by a friend and a special guest, because the other Steve had some things come up and he couldn't make it, and we're going to talk about some RPGs, things and stuff and whatever. But let me introduce my guest, who is also a podcast host here on the D20 Network, and that is Robert from How We Roll, who but for the fickle winds of commercial real estate, would probably be in a coma right now after 4 days of gaming goodness.
Yes, and thank you for having me, Steve. Glad to be on again.
Oh, not a problem, not a problem. Thank you for taking the time to join me. So, as I mentioned, you're one of the three hosts of How We Roll. So, if people search How We Roll, either on any of their podcast feeds or on YouTube, what can they expect to find?
Yes, well, How We Roll Gaming is hosted by me and my friends Nick and Daryl. We are a podcast that likes to talk about everything RPG. Sometimes we shine light on certain gaming systems. We've done one for the Star Wars system, Fantasy Flight system, as well as we've also done one for Aliens and even the new Aliens that came out. We also do RPG glory stories rather than horror stories, just telling stories about the best moments we've had in gaming. And every year annually, we like to spruce up what we call our Session Zero Manifesto to help those who are starting out to realize what would be the best things they need to do to actually just set the ground rules for a campaign with their group.
Cool. So it's kind of a mix of sometimes, what do you want to say, game review, GM/play techniques, etc.
Yeah, basically we definitely highlight systems, definitely tell our own stories, but we like to tell things especially about the group dynamic, like what do you do to start a game, find a group, how do you deal with a problem player, how do you tell a story without railroading them, like if they zig instead of zagging, how do you handle that, stuff like that.
I would never zig instead of zag.
Oh, totally no. And we've never done that when you played at the con with us. But yeah, our most recent episode was how you engineer social encounters, because RPG is definitely a mix of combat, but also social encounters.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that almost ties into what I had thought we could kind of talk about in a weird sort of way. At least in my head, it ties in. I don't know about everybody else, but I think there's a perception out there that people talk about, and they want to classify games as narrative or crunchy. And I think that's kind of, I don't necessarily want to say false, but misleading.
Yeah, that's the word I would use for it too. Like people like to think there's one has to be in either camp, crunch or narrative.
Yeah, but I think, like, okay, here's the thing. I think you can, depending on what you want out of a game, you can enjoy a crunchy game that doesn't have a whole lot of narrative. But at that point, I think my question would be, why aren't you just playing war games?
Exactly. It's definitely something you'd have to discuss with your group, basically what your preference is, but there's no established rule that a crunchy game has to forego narrative to make the game fun, nor is narrative precluded just because there's more emphasis on mechanics and dice rolls.
Yeah, I mean, like, both of us play a bit of a variety of systems, and I mean, heavens, together we've played games as loose as Havoc Brigade, which doesn't have a whole lot of rules, and by about halfway through the session, you throw them out the window anyway.
Yeah, it's what it's made for.
And then you have games like Slay Industries, or Delta Green isn't really crunchy, but it's got quite a bit of structure there. But, I think, like, just because there's rules doesn't mean you can't have a good story. And I think, in a sense, I think sometimes maybe what I think I do is if I feel like the mechanics are going to get in the way of the cool story, then we just kind of push the mechanics under the rug for a minute.
Very true. My group especially is very big on the roll portion of the game, like roll OLE rather than ROLL. So we will do the cool story bits, and what we like to do is that we'll just let the story play out, and if the GM says, okay, at this point, this is a roll scenario, like I want you to roll something to see what happens, that's when we'll ask for it instead of doing it in the beginning. We'll just like, nope, hands off. Let's see where this goes. We put a little framework and see where the story takes us. Depending on the system, it's like, okay, maybe now we need a roll, now not, or we bring a mechanic in here. But if the story is going well, we'll just sit back and let it play.
Well, and I think this also, I'm sure, I know I've said it numerous times on the show, but I'm guessing you've probably heard it from the same source that I have. GM Chris once told me, he said, don't make them roll unless failure is interesting.
Yes, in fact, that's what we brought up last episode. It's like you shouldn't roll for the mundane or the everyday. Only roll when there are some measure of stakes in there, or where a failure can lead to an interesting side tangent or route than a
Yeah.
success would.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me. Apparently, my cold that I thought I was over has decided I was wrong. Um, but like, yeah, and like games like like I know again we played Delta Green together. Delta Green expressly calls out at times that look, if there is a character in the party with a skill over roughly this percent, then just don't bother to have them roll. They're gonna figure this crap out. Now, what I will do occasionally in a circumstance similar to that is I may have them roll, but it's not really a pass fail. It's more of a do you find it quick or do you struggle? Because sometimes that struggle can allow you to add things that'll make it interesting.
Yes, or we've said like if there's a situation where you're gonna get the answer anyway, we're gonna roll to see how well you succeed, or because you can succeed, but still people can hold things back. You can concede and they can tell you everything. We want to make it an interesting scenario to where whatever you roll, whether pass or fail, is going to lead to an interesting outcome. No, even if your skill is over yay high, especially in the Star Wars system, it's always interesting to roll and see just what the what the dice declare. Do you succeed, but there's major catastrophe involved, or do you fail, but something really good happens? It's always interesting to see what the dice decide in that game.
Oh yeah, that I actually so I ran the initial Shadow of the Beanstalk uh adventure for the group that I usually play Earth Dawn with about a month ago. And none of them had ever played any narrative dice. And they were a little bit, I don't want to say put off, but like, wait a minute, I don't quite get this at first. And then, they kind of understood and were like, oh, yeah, this is pretty cool. But they ended up basically with, and if anyone's familiar with the adventure, you basically got two opposing gangs and the New Angeles Police Department are the three major factions involved in this story. They ended up having all three pissed at them by the end of the adventure.
Oh boy.
Um,
Just make no friends, huh?
well, but it was combination of poor roll here. We set up a plan. Oh, this seems like fun. I'll flip a story point, and you know, plus like when what's essentially a starting level PC essentially tries to double cross both gang leaders into confronting each other, but they're both, I think, Nemesis 2 and have really strong social pools. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that
But I mean,
reminds me in the Walking Dead game, the universe game that we play that Daryl hosts. That was the interesting part of where one of our players was a scientist who was trying to cure the virus and instead ended up making an upgraded version to the virus where the zombies are even better and more powerful.
hmm.
And Daryl's like, yeah, that'll totally never come up again. Especially now that his character is dead. So,
Well, but I think like crunch is one of those things that like, and I think too, are you one of those people that there's a difference between crunch and crunch that does things?
Yes, there. I see a difference between that because I actually like a game that has some like thought out mechanics. Like it's not
Hmm.
just freestyle; it's just who I am. But the best example I can think of is going back to Star Wars. That was our group's bread and butter before we started branching out over diverse
Hmm.
other systems. Is that Star Wars had a very good system? It was the Genesis model. You could roll and everything would be good. There was not much crunch there until we ever got to vehicle combat.
Hmm.
That was when the crunch actually happened because you would have to roll damage. Okay, what's that? Weapon shields. Okay, this is how many difficulty you got. Okay, you do this much damage. You got to minus it from the whole. So you got injury here. And it would just crunch, crunch, crunch. That our group has all agreed that Fantasy Flight is really good, except for the vehicle combat. That's where the crunch comes in, and no one really has fun in that.
Do you guys use the Order 66 Genesis rules conversion for that, or you've been just playing standard Star Wars rules?
We're doing standard right now, but we've mostly forgone actual vehicle combat. Like if we're in space, we go to a narrative style. Just we don't really care about the crunch.
Hmm.
I know Daryl and Nick want to incorporate the Genesis rules. They just have not had an opportunity to do so yet.
Yeah, well, I know there's some stat modification and stuff that has to take place, and it's not a lot, but it is something you have to do other than just grabbing the template, for the
Yes.
ship and whatever. But no, like eh, I kind of when I say that I like games that where the crunch does something. The example I kind of point to is fifth edition Dungeons and Dragons versus Cyberpunk 2020. To me, they're very, very comparable levels of crunch in those games. But I feel like I get a lot more from that crunch in Cyberpunk than I do in D&D.
I would agree with that, especially Galabias, because I do run a Cyberpunk Red game, not 2020, but it's still the same system in a
Same
sense.
core
Is that
system, yeah.
it's the same core system, and I definitely like it because as GM, it gives me the feeling to use narrative, but it's also condensed into specific skills. Like not everyone has the same set of skills. Certain people in certain professions have some skills, some don't. That's what I
Yeah.
actually like. As D&D is as okay, these are all the core skills. Everybody has them. It's just how well they are at them. While Cyberpunk is like, no, what you what you specialize in gives you certain skills. Like a lawman is going to have really good intimidation or deduction, not really going to be big on net running or computers or security
Hmm.
tech or cyber tech because that's not what they're specializing in. They may have a little bit, but they're not going to have that, nor would they have like wilderness survival, like possibly a nomad character would have. And that
Hmm.
can help me single out situations, be like, okay, you got to get into a net. I hope you have a net runner, or you're kind of screwed on that, which actually brought my players to bite in the butt when on the second part of a campaign session, their net runner wasn't there, which where they really needed a net runner there.
Yeah.
And but I like the system, especially with how you can overly succeed if you get a 10, which means you just get to roll another one, and then you've got this like this big like 30 something number, which always makes everyone feel good, especially if it keeps happening.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Exploding dice are fun. And like but like the crunch with Cyberpunk to me always felt like it did more than like with D&D it always felt like, well, I have this and I have this and I have that and I have that. So I have a plus 3.
Yeah,
And
so
Cyberpunk just doesn't. It's like, oh, I this thing, and and it maybe it's just in my head, but it just feels like the the calc the mechanics make more stuff happen other than just determine whether you hit or not.
yes, and there's definitely a little bit of those type of modifiers, but more it's environmental type things. Like people can assist you, but then it eliminates their turn, and then if they can't assist you at all, they really can't give you any advice. Like if someone doesn't know how to pick a lock, they're not really going to be able to assist you with picking the lock. They may even be a detriment to you. But it always feels like when you roll, there's still that difficulty rating, but if like you go way over it, it can be something really cool or like you look really great. A little certainly biased in my opinion, but it's just really fluid and helps me more than just the okay, you roll that d20, you get a 19, okay, you're over their armor class, you hit them, that type of deal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and see, like, I'm involved in a campaign right now. In fact, I played earlier today a game called Earth Dawn, which I know you're not familiar with.
Mhm.
Earth Dawn is a quite crunchy system, but it uses exploding dice, which I mean are fun, but they work both ways.
Yes.
Um, but the thing about Earth Dawn that I think to a certain point, Earth Dawn has a very unique system, is the way I'll put it. And I've said before on the show, I think Earth Dawn is one of those games where it's really hard to separate that setting from that system. And the lore and the way they've set up the world is fascinating. But I wouldn't ever go, I'm going to take this system and go play something else with it.
Yeah, I agree
You
with
know,
that. There are some systems where it's like, no, it's for this one. I couldn't see it was something else. Like we're actually playing in, we were, well, still are. It's almost ending, but we're playing in Avatar: Last Airbender game or the Avatar Universe game, and I
Mhm.
honestly couldn't see their story rich, but like the two D6s system in like D&D or Star Wars. Even though I know there was a system that did that, but it's like I can't see it.
Well,
It
but I
works for
think
Avatar.
when you get to like Powered by the Apocalypse, the moves and the playbooks are set up for the setting. And like, okay, it's the same general structure, but it's not the same system. Like, I don't know, maybe it is in a very, very strict sense, but like your moves for your character in Avatar are going to be wildly different than your moves for your character in Monster of the Week or Apocalypse World or Dungeon World or, you know, Masks a New Generation or whatever. Like that's where I think like yeah, now and those are games that are much more narratively driven, and I think where maybe sometimes people get this separation is that you do have a lot of games that rely heavily on the narrative and much less on the crunchy bits of mechanic. You know, like you said, Avatar is it's a 2d6 system. It's what 1 to 6 is fail, 7 to 10 is partial success.
Yeah, one to six is a fail, 7 to 10 is like partial success, 11 to 12 is like great success.
Yeah.
And well, they even say in the books like there'll be sessions where you don't even roll any dice; it's just all
Mhm.
story.
And I mean that's cool in a way, right? Like as long as everyone is engaging, like the other campaign that I'm currently actively involved in, and actually, you know, because of the way things came together, I got to play for the first time since December yesterday, is the Exalted game that we're recording for our APs. And that's kind of a crunchy system. I mean, it's I don't know if it's story path technically. I don't know. It's you know, progression of the old White Wolf system. But we have played 3.5, 4 hour sessions of that with one or maybe even no dice rolls because we're just doing stuff and talking and like it's like there's no point in actually rolling for this stuff. You know, the putting that outcome to the randomness of the dice potentially damages the story flow.
Very true. Like my favorite campaign that we as a group are playing right now is Walking Dead because I just like all the characters made, and we have some just great social encounters between NPCs, but mostly between each other, just acting as survivors in this Walker apocalypse. And
Hmm.
there are times where we can go 2 to 4 hours without rolling a single dice because we're just so busy playing off each other, playing NPCs, like butting heads with each other in a way that makes narrative sense. But we also know we're not hitting each other to where it'd be like, we haven't even rolled a dice in 4 hours, but then it gets to a point where it's like, okay, this is so good. I want to see how this goes. We may do an opposed player versus player roll just to see
Hmm.
who comes out on top. Doesn't mean you completely believe the other person. Maybe a little bit what they're saying is getting through to you, and then just through that we give our GM so many tidbits or info that he'd be like, "Ooh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea," and we just give him ideas for the future.
Now, I think I know the answer to this based on having played with you. Do you much more tend to play towards the feel of the rules than the actual text of it?
Yes, I would say definitely myself and our groups, we will do a feel towards the rules, but we won't be rules lawyers that like, hey, it says this, so we have to do this. Especially our biggest example is that we've homeruled Scathing Tirade from Star Wars Fantasy Flight game because Daryl and Nick were just like, okay, this is if you get a good talker with good skills, it's like broken. And well, my character knocked out like 4 Death Troopers with, and they're like, no, we have to reskin this because this is not right.
Well, yeah, like I think, see, to me, that's an issue with very crunchy games, is that because they are so mechanically rich, if you will, there's more opportunities to exploit those rules. And I love exploiting stuff that I find in, say, video games.
Yes.
But my experience as far as RPGs has been, while that exploit might be fun for the person whose character is doing it at the table, it wears thin very fast for the rest of the table.
Very true. In certain situations, I can definitely see that, or someone someone can break a campaign so much, or like people exploit it so much that it wasn't a group I was in, but Nick or Daryl could tell the story better. But it got to a point where they were even saying like, "We're so rich, we got all this. Why are we even still doing this? Like, why are we even going out? Because we're loaded, basically, because we exploited in this case the scoundrels' lucky feet."
Hmm. Yeah, and like I don't know, like part of why I play and how I GM a lot of the time, it's oh, this could be interesting. Let's see what happens if we do this. You
Yeah,
know, you that that was the whole premise of the frickin' Finding Bigfoot Genesis game that you all played was like, plus having played with you guys, I knew you guys would have a lot of fun if I just threw the idea at you and went, here's some characters. But like the whole concept of that was, look, I'm gonna set this concept in front of these people, and well, technically it's PvP. It's not PvP in the traditional sense. And it's almost a GM-less scenario, really, because it's all, or 80% of it, 90% of it is player interaction, but you're on opposite sides, sort of.
yes, and again, that was very fun. Especially, I remember when you said like I had a thing for it, but then halfway through, I was like, you know what, let's do this. I want to see where this goes.
Well, right, yeah, like so for just to give any listeners who haven't heard me talk about it before, the initial concept behind the scenario was you have a group of Bigfoot and a group of researchers out in the wilderness interacting. And at some point there were going to be, black helicopters and government agents show up, and kind of the intent was, okay, now, or what I was hoping was that then, okay, the Bigfoot and the researchers both feel threatened by this. Will they work together? And I ran it twice. And the first session I ran it, when I was about to do that, I was 90% sure that if I had, the people playing the Bigfoot would have just ran off. Well, at that point, it's now no longer an interesting game because I only have 3 of the 6 players at the table really involved. In the session you played, you guys did this whole other thing that went off a rail, and
Yep.
you ended up eventually coming together through bizarre circumstances.
Like an uneasy truce, and someone somehow being able to speak Bigfoot.
Or kind of, and Bigfoot sort of figuring out how to work a radio.
Yes, and also we tried to bury one of them alive because we thought they had turned horses into like these small little soul gem things when it was just someone's My Little Pony collection.
Right, but like to me, like okay, that was very much you guys saw the spirit of the story, of the idea, and you very much ran with what was in my head. And I know we didn't use all the rules for Genesis exactly as we were supposed to that night. But I don't think anyone at that table gave a damn that we didn't do it exactly right.
Oh no, and then my big thing is when you and the other players at the con who played our Delta Green 3-part series, and in the second session, something I entirely made up with the Delta Green system, that orb that
Mm-hmm.
transfers people's basically minds into other people. And then I hear from Nick in session 3, someone basically used it like a flashbang grenade, and then everyone got mixed up, and I was like, okay, I did not intend that, but that is awesome.
Oh, it was great fun. It really was. Meanwhile, my character's trying not to freak out because fire. Um,
Yes. I was like,
but
oh, I totally did not plan that.
well, but I think that goes to and maybe this is a factor in crunchy designs. I remember when we had a conversation with Jay Little a couple years back, and he was talking about different things he's learned, over his career as a game designer. And he said, one of the things he said, you do your simulations and you do your play testing and whatever. And he said, you are aware that there are these edge cases where, okay, the dice could come up. And in this in particular was some circumstance in the Warhammer 3rd edition with Wizards where if the dice came up just right, big boom and not in a good way. And he said, they were aware of it, that it was a potential thing. But he said the thing that he said kind of caught them off guard was once they released it, how many instances of that happening they got reports of. And he said the thing that you kind of maybe lose sight of, and I may not be quoting him accurately here entirely, but the general concept was that when you turn this loose into to the public, no matter how big your sample size and your simulation was, it pales in comparison to people actually playing the system. And where I think that ties in here is if you have a more crunchy system, and especially in the modern age of the internet with all the, be it Discords, Reddits, even forums going back a little bit, whatever, people finding those exploits within the rules is so much more prevalent. And then you have those people who really enjoy the technical mastery of the game that want to exploit those exploits. And, as I said before, I think sometimes, more often than not, I'll say, I think someone repeatedly using an exploit becomes less and less fun for everyone else at the table.
Yeah, because it can also feel like at times, if they keep exploiting it, they're almost kind of having main character syndrome, and then everyone else is not having any fun because this person, we know what he's going to do, and he's going to break everything again, or they can feel like the game's being broken by this person. That's an
Mm-hmm.
entirely different topic. How do you deal with someone who keeps breaking the game, really? How do you kind of reorient them back to that group dynamic?
Okay, well, do you want to kind of go down that road a little bit? Because how do you deal with someone who's breaking the game but within the rules?
I think that's definitely a point where a discussion has to be had first, just addressing it. But like, yes, I understand it's part of the rules, but I will fully admit I'm not having fun, and we can use other players to also air that they are not having fun with this. So that's when you can say, okay, because of this, and because we just want the group to have fun together to build a story, I'm going to homer this to where that exploit can no longer be done. Or if you do that, then I can also apply it to my own people. Then, but definitely give them a chance first to be like, hey, I get it. You like this, definitely within the rules, but it's also no fun for the group and as a whole. And this is a group story where you're trying to tell a story and have fun together. So please, I get it's in the rules, but I'm going to say right now, can you please stop doing that
Hmm.
kind of thing? Definitely address it and be honest about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely on the right track. And I learned that somewhat early on in a way. Not fully, or I guess I should say I maybe kind of became aware of the scenario because the first game I ever ran was Rifts. Well, essentially, no matter what anyone does in Rifts, somewhere in some book there is something I can pull out and it's bigger and badder. But all that does is just generate a power spiral. And to a certain point, if you take that tact, like by so to speak, trying to counter that player or that circumstance by overpowering them, I think as a GM, you run the risk of actually making the problem worse because we'll just say, you have this one player that's dominating things and four or five that are sitting there. Well, now you bring out this encounter that is very, very tough on that character, that one character, but it's massively overwhelming for the rest of the table. And so now they were already feeling like, well, man, we aren't that good. And now they got slapped with yeah, you really suck.
Yeah, and then that other player feels like now you're punishing me for playing the system rightly. I just found a way to make it work for me.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, I don't know. I guess I mean to me it's just like, man, play to the spirit of things and I see the thing is I do enjoy some crunch. Like, you said you do. There's some fun to be had with sometimes being able to work the system. But I feel like if unless that is the entire focus of the whole table, it becomes distracting from everyone else.
Yeah, so I found, especially in the crunch that happens during combat scenarios, is that you can make the crunch fun when you use the crunch to narratively animate what's going on. Like in my Cyberpunk, a few sessions ago, they had their first like mini boss encounter. Basically, the one thing that's a step below an actual boss, they could be like a 1 versus 5 kind of thing. And this, and my mini boss had the ability to dodge bullets because he had enough evasion or his reflex in his characteristics to be able to evade range attacks rather than just melee. So of course, that extended the fight more because I was doing some really good rolls and he was able to dodge freely. But because of Cyberpunk, I used it the whole okay, he's got a forensic call that makes him like go in and out of sight. You're seeing doubles of him. So he's like moving here, moving here, moving here, giving you a shot there, blocking your hit there. Basically feel like, yeah, they're actually fighting this really skilled opponent who is blow for blow matching them at times, but you're getting it through, and little by little, you're whittling him down to where it really is just like numbers beat skill in certain scenarios, especially if the other people are skilled as well. So it feels more rewarding when you finally get that last hit or you finally get him incapacitated.
Hmm. Yeah, and let me ask you this on Cyberpunk, because I think the one thing that Red still uses some ablation, armor ablation rules, doesn't it?
Yes, they do totally armor ablation. Like
Okay, because I
as long
remember,
as you get through, you're gonna get the damage, but then also the armor goes down by 1. So yes, it is ablated.
and so the one thing I found in GMing in that, and again more in 2020 than Red, but that game is so sensitive to how many people are involved on whichever sides of the combat. Like adding two goons, while those goons aren't particularly a threat, just the fact that there's two more attacks happening every round can drastically shift the balance of the game, the encounter.
Yes, and I honestly think that adds to what they are going for. That Cyberpunk is this living sandbox simulator, like you're trying to survive, but you're also trying to survive in a dark reality where you could catch a stray bullet and die. That's why you have to pick your fights carefully, because even the game says, especially in the gigs you make, is like, okay, your opponents are usually group size +1 or +2. Like you're not going to overwhelm them with goons because they'll just all die eventually. That's why you have to balance the groups to basically be equal to the group size, or lieutenant is versus like 3 people. Mini boss can be like 4 people. An actual boss can take on the entire group because they're skilled. And they got to pick and choose their battles. They got to use their cover. They got to make sure they have good armor. Or when I have goons, I make sure not to have them all focus on one person. I will spread it out. And I will have the goons also pick the most armored individual as well, because I know they can soak more, or I'll shoot the one that has the evade ability to evade range combat, because then it gives them a chance to evade and no damage, to make it feel like it's a gunfight back and forth, like it's an actual battle or a skirmish.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think too, you know, a lot of, certainly in my history as a gamer, a lot of, be it D&D, a lot of games we view combat as this, we're going to stand here and fight until there's only one side left.
True.
And Cyberpunk, I don't think was designed with that concept at all. Like
Oh no, no, no. There
Cyberpunk
are
is intended to be hit run, or carefully plan ambush, like
Oh yeah,
extended combat.
Cyberpunk will literally say for the bad guys sometimes if X amount die or half of them get injured or dead, the rest will either flee or surrender. Like they're actual people like, okay, this is too much. I value my life more than this score. I'm getting out of here. They feel
Hmm.
like actual people are like, okay, we're outgunned. I'm not gonna stay here and fight to the last man. That's stupid. I want to live. So I'm out.
Yeah, and so yeah, I think that's the thing is like, but I think the crunch versus narrative debate really, in a lot of sense, more comes down to do you want to basically play almost a mini war game, or do you want to have fun in a world with a story? And I don't think having the crunch there precludes being able to have a story in any way. But I think like a lot of people, and look, I know I was this way early in my gaming career. I wanted the fights, I wanted the this and that, and so I didn't understand games that didn't have at least a moderately robust combat system, because that's what I initially thought this was a combat simulator with a little bit of story on top.
Yes, and I had that as well, but over time, just experiencing, even just watching campaigns online on YouTube, like honestly, Critical Role, but other stuff. It's just like I saw how the mechanics led to a story, and honestly, this is a talk you have at session zero. It's like this is the universe. It has more crunch, or maybe it has more story. Are you looking for a role type game? Are you looking for a role type game?
Hmm.
Because this system has these mechanics or this system is more focused on story. What are we all looking to what are we all looking to have in this? Do you want more combat heavy or more mechanic heavy, or do you want to tell a story with your friends? And if so, they and also emphasize one does not preclude the other. If you want story with your friends, that does not mean we're not going to roll anything, but we can use the rolls to tell the story. Or if you want more roll or combat heavy, that does not mean a story is exempt from it. We can build through that. But if that's
Hmm.
not the focus, we don't have to focus on the story. But we can make a story through the crunch.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and this is where I think the NDS really kind of shines, because I think the brilliance of that system is that, look, they called it the narrative dice system, and that is actually a really accurate moniker, because the mechanics enforce narrative into gameplay. You it it would be really hard to play a Star Wars or a Genesis game as a straight, goblin stomp dungeon crawl, because
Now it's made for.
others, well, but I think the dice mechanics generate story all on their own, and so it's there. You almost can't get away from it.
Oh yeah, very much so. Some of our best moments have been through dice rolls, like when I did an astrogation check, succeeded, but got two narrative despairs on it. Oh boy, did my GMs have fun with that.
That could be interesting.
Oh, it did. We basically went to a spot where it was the correct spot, but then we were in a nebula during an asteroid shower.
Hmm. Let me ask you this: do you think some GMs lean on crunch as as a way to avoid? I'm trying to phrase this properly. As a way to avoid having to improvise story beats, like are a lot of, and I'll just say us as GMs, do we not think out the story that we want to tell with enough looseness to allow for that narrative that just develops? And so if we go heavy on the crunch, it becomes uh, 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 an if then else scenario as opposed to a something scenario. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like it's more like I call it the beginning GM scenario where you have the story, you want to tell the story, you have the story all planned out, and then they don't go or they don't take the hook or the avenue that you wanted them to go down. And that's when you have to be like, oh, okay. And I, especially myself, when I first start out, I was in that if then else scenario. It's like, no, I need them to go here. They didn't do that. Okay, I need to find a way to get them back on track. But I'd say over time, especially with an understanding group, like you're starting out, you're going to make mistakes, even a narrative way. But it's whether you stay in that if then else mindset that determines whether you're make you're making the mistakes or it starts becoming like a railroad adventure. And you just got to get out of that mindset like this is not just your story, this is everyone's story. So we're making it communally. So I've started not fully writing out my stories, but just putting out, okay, here are the main plot points. Here's the end goal, where I want us to be. I have this setting, I have the NPCs, and I'm just going to let them come what may.
Yeah, I think, you know, that sounds really solid. I mean, like, I think to me that means more like, instead of planning out your storyline, you go, okay, here is my theoretical big bad. His goal is this. He is doing things working towards this goal. There are these other factions. Their goals are this, this, and that. They are working towards those goals. They do certain things. The party then influences, reacts, whatever, to those things. And now, your NPCs, be it your factions, your big bad, whatever, like I think in terms of plotting it out, don't go, um, you know, the the Mandalorians are going to steal the Death Star. That's not your story. Your story is the Mandalorians want to steal the Death Star, and then they work towards that, and your players work towards whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish or prevent or whatever, along with, well, the Empire wants to crush everybody, so you know what I mean, like, that sound like kind of the same thing, but I think that's almost a better way to plan, is not necessarily focusing on specific events, but that your NPCs, your villains, whatever, have goals and plans, but because this is a living, breathing story world, plans change.
Yes, and you always want a villain that can adapt. Like I won't spoil it for if my group watches this. So I have a villain that has an overarching plan, and there's either groups in this place that are doing their own thing, and even the player crew are doing other things that are affecting the story. But my villain is in such a high place that they can oversee everything that's happening. Be like, okay, well, that route's no longer going to work, but I see this new route is open because of their actions, which I can still use to move towards my goal. Or this is going smoothly, and they have no idea I'm even pulling the strings here. And then even I'm going to use a proxy to direct the crew to a job that's going to achieve what I want done.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's the thing, is like, as much as people want to call the GM the storyteller, yes, but no. You're in a sense, yes, you're telling the story, but you're not exclusively in control of it.
I like
Like,
to I like to call it we're stage production. We set the stage, we get the actors, we get the premise, but we don't give them a script. We don't give them a a linear path unless it's like a one shot. And we just say, this is the story, this is where you are, this is what's happening, action.
hmm, yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. Now, how much experience do you have running, we'll say, longer form pre-written modules?
I will say, as far as pre-written modules, I have very little. In fact,
Hmm.
let me think if I even run a module.
No, I was just curious because I've sort of
I
tried
don't
that a
think I
time
have.
or two, and it's very hard for me to, like, coach them into the storyline and hit the beats that I feel like I need to hit for this module to do what it's supposed to do.
I found because my friend Nick has run modules has run modules before. In fact, we had just finished running the Jewel of Yavin module a few months back.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick straight up said, okay, I know what the goal is, I know what the end game is, but there are certain parts of this story I'm not even going to use
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like they don't fit, or I feel like you guys are going to make something better. So instead, still got the premise, but I'm going to let it go where it goes. So he
Mm-hmm.
still uses the module, still uses the NPCs as they're written and structured, but he's not going to staunchly follow the module as it is.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just something that I sometimes wonder about and have struggled with myself. And such as it is that I actually get to run games, it doesn't seem to happen as much as I'd like it to, because well, time,
Uh,
real life, job.
yeah, I get that. I'll say the closest I've gone to a module is that I've taken one of the Star Wars modules, like what it's about and even the villain, and I've put it in my existing campaign. Not in the same scenario, like they didn't even go to the planet the module was on. I just had still had the premise and the MacGuffin put on their world with the villain, and I
Hmm.
made it my own story.
Yeah, like I feel like Mask of the Pirate Queen would be a really cool one to like take the concept and not necessarily do it the way they wrote it.
Yeah, the one I actually took was Shadows of Dathomir.
Okay. Um,
I used that villain and the MacGuffin there, but I made it in my own story. Like instead of being on Toydaria, they started the thing with an auction on Utapau.
aha. All right. Well, I don't know how well we actually stayed on topic today, but then again, anyone who listens to this show regularly will know that that's pretty much not our strong point. So,
Yeah, I feel we kept the core theme, but like as we were talking about, no set linear time frame. We just used it as we saw fit to talk about
yeah,
the
but
topic.
I mean, I feel like, yeah, I guess crunch versus narrative really comes down to what is it you want out of a game. And because you have narrative doesn't mean you can't have crunch. And because you have crunch doesn't mean you can't have narrative. But some people may want to play much more narrative or much more crunch.
Yes, and I feel well, I know that is something that is just you got to hash out at a session zero. You got to get everyone's feeling. You got to explain what the system is, and you got to see where they're going. Like, does everyone want quench? Does everyone want narrative? Do some want quench? Some want narrative? And how do you blend that into a cohesive campaign with a cohesive group? Basically, a balancing act in that situation.
Yeah, yeah, that really comes what it comes down to. So, before we do our ending bit here, do you, off the top of your head, know all the places people can find how we roll, or you just want me to put the links in
Yeah.
the show notes? And
Mm. Well, we have our website, howwerollgaming.com. You can also find us on our YouTube channel, on Spotify, on Apple Play, or any podcast place you use to get your podcast. We even have our Patreon, howwerollgaming.com, Patreon/howwerollgaming.com. And you can go there, be a member on our tier for just $2 a month, getting special on-air recognition, even discounts on our merch store, which we do have. I'll fully admit I don't remember the link, but we
I'll
do have
find it,
one.
or I'll make Daryl give
Yeah,
it to me again.
or yeah, Daryl will definitely give it to you. Yeah, and then we even have podcast at howwerollgaming.com if you want to send in your own RPG glory stories or just topics you want us to discuss.
Cool, cool. All right. Well, I think with all that, then it's time to play Game of the Week.
Yes.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. So, would you like to go first, or do you want me to?
I will start. I do not know for a fact if it's out yet, but I have been seeing online just something I feel I'd be interested in. It's a game called The Black Company. It's a
Oh,
role-playing
yeah.
game, a fast-paced and deadly on swords, sorcery, and soldiers, but it's a very dark and gritty because it's basically medieval version of Delta Green. There's suspense. It's easy to learn. You create your own character, go through these fulfilling roles and missions. It uses the same percentile system as Delta Green, but with the caveat that only the players roll dice. The GM never rolls any dice. They just interpret and improvise on the fly on that. You have no hit points, you have no sanity points, you just have a single damage state, a single stress state, peaks and falls at details, and you're just in this knit and gritty medieval setting. Has this black company of soldiers that does the empire's dirty business, just trying to keep the peace and stop the dark beasties in the shadows from taking down the
Yeah,
empire.
that's based off, and I can't think of the author's name now, but that's based off a novel series. I remember seeing that.
Glenn
Yeah,
Cook.
yeah. And I know a
It's
lot
based
of
off
people
Glenn
have said that
Cook's
it's
novel.
very, very, very good. I started reading or listening to one of them at one point, and I was quite enjoying it, and then got distracted. Um, yeah, yeah, Arc Dream's putting that out, aren't they?
Who is putting it out? Let's see if I can find it. Nah, sorry, I can't find it off the top of my head, but
I'll look at it. I think it's Arc
no,
Dream's
you're right.
putting
It
that out.
is. Arc Dream Publishing is taking it out. I saw it now.
Yeah,
But
because
it's a game basically set. You are going to be soldiers, and you are those soldiers. You're not the commanders. You're not the rulers. You are just the soldiers on the ground fighting this war, fighting this subterfuge, because that's what the novelist intended. He wanted to tell a story about the knit and gritty, dark life of soldiers.
hmm no, that sounds really cool. I remember seeing that and thinking, I want that. How much do I want that? Because I have a lot of stuff that I haven't used already.
But yes, if you guys are interested, they have a website, theblackcompany.rpg.com, where you can look at it and even look at a little bit of playtesting that's been done on it.
Cool. Very cool. Well, I am going to shout out one that I kind of discovered, and I haven't played this yet or even really looked at it. But hold on a second here. I'm going to drop a link in the green room. This is actually for a bundle. It's for a game called Remnants, which it's a mecha game, and this is actually from like 2011, but it's a post-apocalyptic mecha game that uh yeah, it's a post-apocalyptic mecha game where, like, you explore burned and broken lands and ancient secrets, all this stuff. And I don't know why the art really looks interesting to me, and for the price currently on drive through, the bundle is
$6.
1650 for the bundle, which includes the core book and two like regional expansions, like setting expansions. So I mean, for 1650 for 3 books, if you like
That's a
mecha
good
stuff,
deal.
it's probably worth looking at. It's from a company called Outrider Studios. Like I said, I'm very seriously considering buying this just because the price is low enough that, like, I won't feel bad if it sits there for quite a while before I look at it. But post-apocalyptic and mecha are like two of my things. So,
I'll tell Nick about that. He's definitely the mecha guy.
hmm but yeah, like I said, for the price of entry, and they're actually, at least for the core book, there are print-on-demand options. So, if you're one of those people who really, really likes having physical things as opposed to just PDFs, that's an option. Um, if you just want the core book, the PDF's only $10. But I mean, at that point, for 650 for two, setting expansions, I mean, why not?
Definitely, why not? Yeah, nice. Be a good thing to look at in the future.
Yeah. So I think with that, anything else you wanted to say before we sign off and call it a day?
At the moment, I'll just say, do a little bit of shilling. Be on the lookout for our next episode coming up in a few weeks. And then we've got our own sister podcast at Casual Nerdity. If you ever want to see us talk shop about shows or movies or even systems on there as well.
Cool. All right. And I think, as far as me and Steve, I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this, you found us somewhere, but you can find us on all the podcast platforms. We are on YouTube, although there's no actual video component. It's just a audio track.
It's good though.
I think, yeah, we have a Patreon as well. We've got a Discord server if you want to come talk to us, ask us questions, tell us we're idiots, or at least me. I don't know about Robert. Robert's not an idiot. I might be. But, with all that, just want to remind everyone to be kind to each other and get out there and play some RPGs.
Have fun, and we'll see you next time.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.